Yeah. All right, man. Listen, what up, fellas? How the fuck y'all doing today? Man, look, so I was gonna sit here and, what I mean, why is this so gigantic? I don't understand, like, why this is being all types of gigantic, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? So let's fix this right here. Okay, so today we got what if Altus versus Turd Flinging Monkey, right? I'll be honest with you. All right. I'm rooting on TFM on this one. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to go back and forth between them a little bit. You know what I mean? But I think TFM did a better job as far as stuff was concerned, right? With explaining the political trichotomy. And so the political trichotomy basically breaks down with individualism, communism, and absolutism. It cuts out, the political compass, right, as a whole. And I'm gonna let TFM break it down because I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's anybody else better to be like breaking shit down to us. So let's get into it and have a conversation about who it is, is better. Let's get to it.
Does not see a difference between the other 2 points of the triangle. So this model is basically how the...
All right, hang on 1 minute, man. Hang on 1 minute. I don't know why it does this shit. Like legit, like I don't know why it does this nonsense. It's completely ridiculous that it does these things. Hang on.
left versus right.
Man, listen, it keeps doing nonsense. I don't know why it does this. Like legit, it does like complete and utter nonsense, right? Like, be aggravating the shit out of me. Hang on a minute. Let me get rid of this. Hang on a second. Here's what we're gonna do. Right. Properties. Back to regular. Go back to this. Right. Then we're gonna try it again. See if it works this time.
Individualism on the upper right, absolutism on the lower right, and communism on the left.
Hang on a minute.
Now, what this chart represents are the way each point does not see a difference between the other.
Hang on. Here's what we're gonna do. Okay. Hang on, man. All right, hang on. Let me see if this operates the way it's supposed to now. Okay. Hit play.
Outdated model.
Still being ridiculous. Hang on 1 minute. 1 second. I'll be right back.
The upper right, absolutism on the lower right, then communism on the left. Now, what this chart represents are the way each point of the triangle does not see a difference between the other 2 points of the triangle. So this model is basically how the world is, but we have a false left versus right dichotomy model. Now that dichotomy model is outdated and archaic, much in the same way that Newtonian physics is archaic and outdated. We have this, relativity and quantum mechanics, which is much more accurate to reality, but we are still operating, as it were, in a false, outdated model of left versus right. So every point of the triangle sees themselves as the only true, when it comes to absolutism versus individualism, they both see themselves as the only true right, and they see the other two as the same. So I'll start with individualism. So individualists, what does communism and absolutism share? They're both totalitarian. The absolutists want kings or fascism or something. They want some form of totalitarian government. for different reasons in the communists, but they both favor totalitarianism. So the individualist sees the totalitarianism which the absolutist and the communist share, and so they label both sides as totalitarian, authoritarian, or statist. So when somebody starts shouting statist at someone, you know that they're an individualist. Now, what about communists? What does individualism and absolutism share? Well, they share elitism and Darwinism. Both individualists and absolutists believe in natural hierarchy and nature, whereas communists reject both. So they see both individualist and absolutist favoring elitism and Darwinism, and they label both of them as reactionaries, fascists, and racists.
All right, so like, listen, I'll be honest with you, okay? My mentality, right? Like my political ideology is communitarianism, right? Which actually matches all three, right? So like you had the communism part where like every family is a commune. This is how it works. You take care of your kids, take care of your wife, take care of your fucking parents. Your parents take care of you. Everybody works for the good of everybody, right? And the community works for the good of the community. But on the same level, you empower the, you know what I mean, like the males of your community or the people in your community, like the families in your community, to be able to be as strong as possible and be as good as possible as an in general thing, right? So with that being understood, hang on a minute, let me see what the fuck is going on over here again, bro. Listen, I don't know, wait, I'm at 84%, so we're good. Okay, right? And so you have that part of it. Right, but on the other side, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have the absolutism part on, like, you know, where you go, listen, you have to have some type of, like, stronger government above you to be able to allow you to have that type of peace and tranquility, to be able to have that type of system as a whole, right? Because, like, what you're trying to do is, like, you're not, like, running this to be able to produce profit. You're running this to be able to produce people. Right, so you want like long-term stability in these type of in these fucking communities as a whole, right? It's not about like standing here having, you know, like massive restrictions on, how do I put this? You have restrictions on capital and have restrictions on people, right? Like you can't just go like, oh man, listen, anybody can move here, because that's fucking dumb, right? Because you want to be able to have stability long-term. But like you still want to be able to have your community be able to last for 300, 400, 500 years. That way you can continue to produce kids and have those kids understand that their grandkids are going to be inculcated with that culture, right? So like you have to have a mix of all these things, which is what we've had throughout the history of fucking mankind. You know what I mean? It only makes fucking sense. But let's keep rocking.
This is why to a communist everybody's a Nazi. Because to a communist, you are. Like, you might laugh and be like, what? I believe in small government. A small government Nazi, haha, it is to laugh. But you believe in elitism and Darwinism, don't you? That makes you a racist and thus a Nazi. So from their perspective, it makes sense. Now, from the absolutist perspective, what does communism and individualism share? Well, they share a belief more or less in democracy and republicanism. Now, to an absolutist, democracy and republicanism represents degeneracy, liberalism, and globalism. And so when you hear people talk about global homo and the shit libs and degeneracy, they're absolutists. And they say that shit all the fucking time. It's like a mating call. And so that's just how absolutists talk. That's the terms they're used to, and this is why they think that way. From their perspective, they see democracy and republicanism, which communism and individualism kind of share, as the same thing, in the same way that communists see the individualists and the absolutists supporting elitism and Darwinism as being fascism, and how the individualist sees the communist and the fascist as totalitarian and the same. Like, you ask somebody who's an individualist, what's the difference between communism and fascism? They'll say it's the same thing. Now you ask an absolutist, what's the difference between communism and fascism? And they'll fucking talk your ear off for an hour about how fascism wasn't that bad, and how communism's the real bad thing, and all this other shit. Because to them, there is a difference. But to you as an individualist, you just see them both as the same thing. Now there's another chart that's probably a little bit easier to read that I can share with you to help make this point. Here we go. All right, so here, oh gosh, now I gotta resize it again. So again, here is how the false left versus right dichotomy. Man, my voice just cracked. I apologize.
Yeah, I always liked how like TFM broke things down, man. It was just so much like better, right? Like it was just so much better at like doing this type of shit. Let me make sure my shit is on point, right? So you see what's going on. Yeah, yeah, all right, cool. You can fucking see it. Make it even better for you. There you go. Now you can see it even better, right? But yeah, I wanted to make like listen. TFM was always really good at just breaking shit the fuck down properly. You know what I mean? Like real shit. And like again, his shit is half the fucking runtime of like What If Alta's video. There's a reason for that, right? Like the reason why his shit is half the fucking time is because like he doesn't have to go into like all this woo woo nonsense about nations and states. It has nothing to do with any of that fucking shit. Like legitimately, right? Like a political fucking compass was meant to like have individuals view things, not fucking states. You know what I mean? Or maybe even like leaders of states. But that was the measure of it. It's not about the measure about where your government is, because government's gonna be all fucking over the place. You know, as far as like what do you like what's your economic system versus like what's your fucking like what's your social system, like all these type of things. Like it's all gonna be completely out of the fucking. It's all gonna be like completely out of whack and shit, because how a community lives versus how another community lives inside of your state is gonna be very different depending on the rural or like local, rural or fucking urban. So like, you know, this is why like Rudyard is having like a hard time like breaking down his shit. Again, like Rudyard, you need to get on the fucking internet and like get on Discord and talk to us. The girl shit. Y'all motherfuckers come to Discord, okay? Come to the political debate Discords. It is so nice to be able to have people to talk to who are gonna knock you in your head with your nonsense. That way you're not walking around in the echo chamber and people aren't letting you just be retarded.
Here's how that looks to the different points of the trichotomy. So we'll start with the absolutists. The absolutists, on the far right, they see monarchism. And the far left, they have communism. Now, the way they define left versus right, and to their point, this is the traditional way. They define the traditional right as reactionary, in support of tradition and stability, and they see the left as revolutionary, who stands for change and degeneracy. So if you're a reactionary, you're trying to maintain the old order, and if you're a revolutionary, you're a leftist. Now, this means that the Founding Fathers, because they rebelled against King George, were fundamentally leftist, because they were revolutionaries. So this is just a reactionary...
It's true, though, right? In the end of the day, it is 100% true. You know what I mean? Now, you could argue, right, that Hamilton and Madison and Washington were fucking reactionaries, right? Because like the Articles of the Confederacy, which was like a super leftist like fucking document, ended up, you know what I mean, getting thrown out. And then like they had, you know what I mean, the Constitution put in, which is much more right wing, much more like much more centralized, much more authoritarian, right, than the original articles were, right? So you can make that argument, but like, you know, kind of, you know what I mean?
Absolutist mentality. This is how they define left versus right. So you have moderates in the middle, then Republicans, fascists, and monarchists on the right, and on the left you have Democrats, progressives, socialists, and communists. Now, to an individualist, going down one space, an individualist defines left versus right as more government versus less government. So a leftist government is highly collectivistic, representing more government and less freedom, whereas the more right-wing a government becomes, the smaller the government until you have no government. So the highest form of right-wing government would be anarchy, no government. And on the far left, you have fascism, communism, monarchism, oligarchs. Any form of total government would be leftist to an individualist. So on the middle you have moderates, and on the right you have Republicans, libertarians, and anarchists. And on the left you have Democrats, socialists, communists, fascists, all this other shit. Now this is why like libertarians are a very American thing. Like back when I was with the Tea Party, we kind of understood that left versus right meant something different in Europe than it did in America. In Europe, most left versus right debates are between absolutists and communists. Whereas in America, you have more of an individualist perspective of left versus right. So this is how, well, traditionally, because again, the Founding Fathers were revolutionaries by the reactionary absolutist standpoint, they would be leftist. So this is, again, this is individualist standpoint. Very American standpoint. Now, what about the communists? To a communist, the far left equals equality, whereas the far right equals elitism. So in the middle, you actually have Democrats. Democrats are considered the middle, according to a communist, with moderates and Republicans being right-wing, and then dictatorships, kings, racists, Nazis, any form of elitist hierarchy would be the far right. Which is why anyone who believes in any kind of differences, who's a racist, is automatically an extreme right-wing fascist Nazi. Now, on the left, you have progressivism, socialism, communism, and then to a leftist, they believe anarchism is basically true equality. Now, obviously, if you understand history, the pursuit of leftist ideals never actually get to anarchism, because in order to get to this fabled, utopia of communism, you have to abolish private property. Well, how can you do that without government? How do you stop people from having property other than by taking it from them with force? So you need a government to do that. And then how do you get from this all-powerful government that takes away everyone's private property to no government? So it's, again, but the problem is with the communists, their ideal is antithetical to nature. It makes no sense. It doesn't even work on paper. Whereas the individualist standpoint, anarchy in freedom is nature. It's not just possible, it's normal. It is the natural state of nature is freedom and anarchy. Like, government was instituted by humans artificially. It's a social construct. So in nature, everyone is free and there's no government. So, like, it's completely in line with nature. It is nature. Anyway, so...
I mean, I would argue that, like, inside of, because we're pack animals, right? Like, we are social animals at the end of the day. Like, inside of, like, that social structure that we have, you end up having governments get formed. Like, whether, I'm not going to argue that, like, they're, like, full-fledged, like, fucking states with bureaucrats. But 100% you have, say you have 300 people, you're going to end up having a leader, because that's Dunbar's number, right? You're going to end up having a leader. You're going to end up having, people who have different jobs, like guarding and soldiers and all this type of shit, hunters. You'll be organized. Right, because we're social animals. All fucking animals, like all animals, will have social orders inside of like their fucking their packs. Anything that like runs around with numbers. Even ants have it. Fucking wolves, fucking chimpanzees, gorillas. There's lions. It doesn't matter. There's always a fucking hierarchy to the order and shit. Just how that operates. Just it's basic. None. Extra.
This is how the 3 points of the trichotomy see the left and the right. And this is why we have a lot of interesting conversations when it comes to who's the left, who's the right. Now, going back to Academic Agent and his whole thing about the weakness of the libertarian argument against socialism, he's approaching it from a reactionary, absolutist perspective. And it's because he's European. The absolutist perspective of left versus right is effectively the European perspective. So Academic Agent is European, and he approaches the left versus right dichotomy from that perspective, and he's also a reactionary absolutist. So nothing he says surprises me. It's just he thinks he's objectively right. But the funny thing is, when you actually look at it and understand these again, the biggest mindfuck is that nobody's evil. There's no good guys or bad guys. There's different groups with different values who all believe that they're right. And they all believe that what's good for them is good for everyone. And the trick is to snap out of that and to stop projecting yourself onto the world. And everyone does this. So you have absolutists back in the Roman times and in Europe, spreading Christianity all across the world with force, with murder and death if need be. Why? Because they truly believed that by making everybody Christian, they would bring a heaven on earth. Well, the problem is people have different values. So as you Christianize the world, people just transpose their values onto Christianity. And so you've had schisms, you had the Protestant Reformation, the 30 Years' War, all these wars all being fought over the same fucking religion. Everyone converted to Christianity, you still have endless wars. Because
honestly,
everyone's...
I believe...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, finish.
Well, my point is...
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I honestly don't believe that they even all believe that themselves. I believe that they just spread Christianity for power and nothing else.
Well, no, because the Catholic Church was very influential after the fall of Rome. My point is, though, is the absolutists believed that by converting everyone to one religion, they would be converting everyone to their values. But values are subjective. And values are all that matter. So when you... And you can see between Catholics and Protestants and evangelicals, you have a complete breakaway with entirely different values, even though they all ostensibly worship the same God. They all have the same Bible, they all pray and do everything the same, and yet they have completely different values. They express their political beliefs and their will completely differently because values are not universal. There is no objective right or wrong, good or evil. There's just differences in values and perceived self-interest. But that didn't stop people from forcibly converting people, waging wars in the name of trying to unify people under one God and one religion. And they did this for what they thought was for the good of everyone. By converting everyone to one religion, we're going to create world peace and all this peace and stability. That ultimately their goal is tradition and stability. So how do you ensure tradition and stability? Is everyone has to have the same traditions, i.e. the same religion, the same denomination. Everyone must be Catholic. Everyone must be whatever. Whatever religion, everyone must be that. You're not allowed to be different denominations because that's different traditions. And so when everyone has the same traditions and the same values, then we'll have stability, then we'll have peace. And by doing this, they literally wage war on the entire world. Now, in the case of Christianity more or less won, in kind of with an asterisk, because they took over not just the Roman Empire, but Europe and America. Like, they Christianized basically the entire world. But what did it accomplish? You had the Eastern Orthodox Schism, you had the Protestant Reformation, all the different wars, the 30 Years' War, and then now everyone basically has turned from Christianity, and now they have nihilism. So, like, what did you accomplish by trying to Christianize everyone? You really accomplish shit. Now, the communists are doing the same thing. They believe that spreading their brand of equality and tolerance and stamping out any kind of differences in culture and race and whatever, they're going to make the world a better place. Well, what are they actually doing? They're just destroying economies and causing starvation and killing people. But they truly believe that they're the good guys. They truly believe that by destroying capitalism and nationalism and basically everything that allows people... Like, without capitalism, just by the way, without all the things that capitalism created, there's no way we can sustain a population of like 6 or 7 billion people. That is only possible due to this very intricate system of capitalist trade. When that is disrupted, billions of people will die. Billions. It will be the biggest death event in human history. All in the name of trying to make the world a better place. All in the name of stamping out inequality. They're going to kill billions of people. And but they're, again, just like the absolutists, they think they're doing it for the right reason. They think that by spreading their values of equality and tolerance and all these feel-good things, that they can create peace. It's perfectly summed up in that Beatles song or that John Lennon song, Imagine. Imagine no nations, no borders, everybody holding hands, everybody being equal. Doesn't it sound beautiful? But that is impossible. That's like heaven on earth utopian bullshit. It doesn't even make sense in the real world, but they think that...
Yeah, all right. Anyway, right. So, now, there's also the What If Altus video. Right, and the What If Altus video, is really fucking long for like no goddamn reason whatsoever. So we're gonna only go over part of it, right? Just like we just went over part of TFM's video because TFM goes on his, he hops on this motherfucking shit, right? Which I'm fine with, because I always, enjoyed, hearing TFM go on his shit. But this what if alters video, you know what I'm saying, is also about the political trichotomy, the political triangle, as it were, right? But again, I don't know why Rudyard has to get into his woo-woo shit all the fucking time. Completely the hell unnecessary. Like real shit. But we're gonna get into it, you know what I mean? Let me get away from like all his fucking ads and shit. We'll get to like the actual part of the video. Let's rock.
All civilizations must deal with a variety of issues, including debt. Debt is insane, and getting rid of debt can be incredibly difficult. But with PDS Debt, you can find the best way to get out of debt. PDS Debt has customized options for anyone struggling with credit cards, personal loans, collections, or medical bills. If you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, this program's for you. Everyone with .com/whatifaltist to get
Swear to God, he already had a fucking ad. I thought we were done with the fucking ads.
your free debt assessment today. So check out PDS Debt and get out of debt now. A great irony is that the political triangle was made by one of my best friends, Kurt Doolittle. Kurt is, in my opinion, one of the most intelligent public figures and one of the most important philosophers of our time. Although he and I don't agree on everything, my staff has a phrase called the Kurt Pill, which is meant to symbolize how learning about his ideas has completely changed our vision of the world. Kurt has made a few very advanced intellectual breakthroughs, which in my opinion, directly or indirectly will change the course of history. Kurt and I have been friends for 2 years, and he's been watching What If Altist for the last 8 years. He's made 5 companies worth $100 million, and now runs a think tank. I've had him check this video out to see if it fits with his understanding of the triangle. Kurt's ideas are very advanced, and I don't pretend to understand all of them. His theories are public on the Propertarian website. With all that out of the way, let's get started. There are a couple points I want to clear out before we start explaining how each of these works. An important distinction between this and the normal political compass that I've seen a lot of people get confused over is that the political compass has 2 separate axes, that being left and right and the other being authoritarian libertarian. Thus, each corner of the political compass shares something with at least another corner. This isn't how the triangle works though. Here there are 3 polarities, with each corner of the triangle being like a magnet which sucks a certain society more so in one direction over another. The edges of the triangle is as extreme as possible for that one trait. The 3 edges of the triangle are authority, freedom, and theocracy. Given these are the only 3 ways humans can interact, you find that different societies naturally end up recycling these methods in.
I mean, none of these things say authority, like freedom or theocracy. It literally just says individualism, communism, and absolutism. Those are the 3 corners of this fucking thing. Like, this is basic. You know what I'm saying? Just really simple ass shit. You know what I mean? Like, come on, dog. You know what I mean? Keep it 100.
Differing ways. This is based off the 3 economic relations, those being trade, hierarchy, or family. Life is about the consumption or sharing of energy, which originally comes from the sun. There are 3 separate ways humans can exchange energy with each other. One is with trade, which we assume to be the only economic relation in our society, but that's kind of obvious, in which, let's say I want your pizza, so I agree to pay you money for the pizza. It's consensual. Then there's hierarchy. The government orders you to pay them money. Alternately, a princely patron giving a donation to an artist in exchange for making a painting to glorify his rule. Thirdly is family. Families are economically communist. You are supposed to share resources in order to help your offspring, partner, or kin. These other 2 relations are more powerful in every other society, and thus we rarely think about them. The 3 edges correspond to fascism, liberalism, and communism, roughly. If you want to have a more fine-tooth combed answer, the societies which
Okay. No, right? Just fucking no. Listen, it's not fascism, communism, and liberalism, right? It's like liberalism is a combination of individualism and communism. Okay? The only, like, fascism is antithetical to, like, fucking liberalism, right? That's why, like, it's on the opposite side of a fucking pole. So, like, liberalism would fit in between individualism and fucking communism. Because that is literally fucking liberalism, right? In the end of the day, like, it's you have to have like a government in order to have like people, in order to have freedoms, right? You know what I'm saying? You have to have safety, right? So like, again, this is stop, bro. Just fucking stop, dog. Don't throw liberalism in here as if it's a positive thing. Liberalism is no, stop. Just fucking stop.
Which respond the most to each edge are the Vikings, Tsarist Russia, or Maoist China. Kurt's real genius here has been the ability to fully figure out the logical extensions of Darwinism. Thus, he has established social rules for how society functions based off understanding the incentive structures of how humans would interact if they were animals, like we actually are. Basically, taking an animal planet look at human societies through the lens of those who get resources and eats whom, not through the story the societies tell about themselves to justify it. If you've ever watched a lot of nature documentaries, which I was personally addicted to as a child, you find a very archetypal story of the entrenched old alpha male with his mates. He grows old and cruel. Then the new young scrappy guy comes out of the wilderness to kill the entrenched.
What is this fucking woo-woo bullshit? Like, yo, for fuck's sake, what is going on with this woo-woo nonsense? I don't fucking understand what is up with this fucking woo-woo bullshit. Like, it literally doesn't make any like, why are we talking about this woo-woo fucking garbage? Like, real shit. Like, why? Why are we fucking, like, talking about woo-woo bullshit? This is dumb. Bro, like, this is fucking dumb as fuck. Why are we even having this conversation? Fucking stupid. Like, why are you don't need this woo-woo shit.
Elite and then mates with the females. This is literally the plot of The Lion King, and you can push this narrative onto almost all animals, whether baboons, lions, lobsters, or horses. In this system, the liberty axis are the young men who don't yet have power, and they form alliances of mutual benefit, or war bands. This is why groups like the Vikings, Cossacks, pirates, or feudal Europe were normally capitalist republics. Meanwhile, the established males are the authority axis, as you can see from the normal historic pattern of tyranny coming from strong government in exchange for order. Meanwhile, theocracy is the women, who mate with whoever the victor is. This final bit will make more sense once I can explain it.
Okay, all right, listen. So this is really important to understand. You cannot have, right, like fucking authority in like real actual like authoritarianism in the 1600s or even really before the 18 fucking 60s, because you didn't have fucking communication. There was no way to have authoritarianism at that point. You didn't have the ability to like control large swaths of fucking land. Like, it just, no, fucking stop, bro. Like, real shit. It's dumb.
Has made the argument that this is the role of religion in human history, which I will explain. Kurt has crafted this to fit onto moral foundations theory, which for, like myself as well, John Haidt was a huge influence on his worldview. Theocracy pulls from the Care Foundation, meanwhile liberty for freedom or fairness, while authority pulls from loyalty, purity, and authority. We will explain this to a greater degree later. An interesting thing you might notice is that this is somewhat similar to the political compass, except for the removal of lib left. Although that's not perfect in that these traits don't perfectly correlate with the political compass, I personally find this justified since there literally aren't any lib-left societies ever. I don't count some tiny hamlet in Catalonia during the Spanish Civil War, which was crushed immediately or devolved into Marxist autocracy. The problem is that there is no vector in which to actually make choices or distribute resources or really govern based off lib-left principles. The fundamental reality is that the idea of forming group consensus and then making choices about that doesn't actually work in the real world. It's just completely impractical. That's not how the human condition works, and that you either need to organize people by hierarchy or a choosing mechanism like market or democracy. The reality is that when people try to push for libertarian left-wing social utopias, it just results in government authoritarian management. As you'll see later, the idea of a libertarian left utopia is a feature of the authoritarian left's propaganda and not a bug. One of the most important points of this video is that Kurt and I independently came to the same conclusion for why Western civilization was so successful. How the West was able to colonize the world, unite the planet together, usher in the scientific, agricultural, health, or industrial revolutions, alongside the Renaissance or Reformation, is due to the West having a balanced social structure. The issue most societies fall into is that they have a single ruling class who co-opt the society for their benefit. exploiting them. This happened with the bureaucracy in China, the priests in India, the slave owners in Rome, or the alliance of the warriors and priests in Islam. The society then stops progressing. What happened in the West was that a balance of power between the church, nobility, merchants, and monarchy, so that none of them could take over and destroy the system. The West had institutions which balanced against these three axes, or church, state, and capitalism. Due to the West being able to activate all three axes, it was able to adapt to every situation. The West created a position in which it effectively hacked the Trinity and was able to hit exponential advancement as a civilization. As we get started, I will try to explain each of these axes through the era of history in which it affected the given.
Yeah, Britain created what was known as a total state, right? And we're all far worse off because of it, if we're going to keep it a buck. Like, that's what we live in today, folks. This is the total state, right? It's what happens when you get rid of, like, you know what I mean, the religion and the king, right? You just end up being ruled by fucking merchants who became managers at the end of the day.
In society the most. Part 1. Authority. The year is 1800 and we're in Russia. Tsarist Russia is one of the most absolutist states in the world. The emperor, or czar, has total authority, as Russia doesn't have property rights and every single part of the society is an extension of the emperor's authority. The majority of Russia's population are serfs. Serfdom in Russia is much more comparable to African American slavery than to West European serfdom, which a lot of you are probably more familiar with. The Russian serfs had basically no rights and could be beaten, raped, sold off, and often killed by their landlords. There's a story of an especially cruel noblewoman where some of her serfs accidentally made eye contact with her, and then she sent them off to Siberia as convicts, a fate nearly as bad as death. Even among the nobility, they would refer to themselves as slaves to the Tsar. The Russian nobility, upon penning their letters to the emperor, would refer to themselves as your humble slave. Russia was a society in which the entire social structure was based off absolute loyalty to your social superior. The serfs served their lords, and the lords served the Tsar. In Russian society, sacrificing your whole life to your superior was seen as normal. The Russian military would draft peasants for their whole lives, and in order to be more humane, shortened it to 25 years. The nobility, in turn, also had to either serve in the military or the government. Russia is the most extreme example of the process of loyalty in of itself. If you folks want to know more, watch the video I made about Russian civilization. However, this is a thread you see all over history. Examples of other societies in which unquestioning loyalty to the ruler were dominant social organizing principles are the Inca Empire, which was one of the most authoritarian societies ever, Persia, the Ottoman Turks, the Roman Empire, and basically every society which has an emperor. As we'll see later, China is the society which built itself from the ground up based off these foundations. An important distinction is that the difference between this form of authoritarianism and the other theocratic feminine form we'll discuss later is that there is no ideological justification, really. For example, in communist societies, they're founded upon unquestioning loyalty to the state, but it's since the state is fulfilling some philosophic or holy goal. It's loyalty to the concept, where in Tsarist Russia, it's loyalty to your social superiors for being social superiors. A recent historic example of this is fascism. In fascism, the goal of unity inside the group is seen as a moral good in of itself. If you read Mussolini, he actually invented the word totalitarian and used it as a positive, in that the goal was for the state to take over every single aspect of a person's life. In Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, on top of this goal was to completely submerge the individual into the tribe. The idea is that it's not loyalty to tribe for the ideology the tribe has, but loyalty to the tribe because it's your tribe. What this means is this is a pretty cynical and
I mean, that's how that's supposed to work, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, you can pick your nose, you can pick your friends, you can't pick your family, right? Like, oh, your family's your family, right? So, like, you have loyalty to your family, not because, like, you like them. It's because it's your fucking family. That's your duty. This is some basic ass shit. I swear to God, I hate fucking British people so fucking much. Like, these fucking Anglo fucks. Just, like, they're garbage, bro. They're just fucking garbage all day long. Like, real shit. I understand it. Like, yeah, listen, if family ends up becoming like dangerous to you, or they end up, you know what I mean, like really becoming like a detriment upon your life, like on some real, like, you know, like some honest stuff, like, yeah, all day, you know what I mean, like, get rid of them motherfuckers, you know what I mean? But like, other than that, man, like real shit, that's your fucking family. You know what I mean? Like, I understand you're not always gonna like your fucking family. But that is your family. You have loyalty to them because of your family. Not because you choose to, because that's your fucking family. That's your fucking duty. You take care of your family.
Practical worldview. It aims at dominance as its ultimate aim. This is why Kurt has correlated it with the established masculine authority. Effectively, we are already in power and would like to keep it that way. This isn't something our society likes, in that of the three axes, this is the one which has been most demonized in our current society. However, like the other axes, this one does have benefits. In that, order is necessary and can be positive if used correctly. In Jungian archetypes, there is the division between Mother Earth and Father Culture. Father Culture creates stability, under which creativity and human civilization emerges, but in itself,
more woo-woo bullshit, bro. Like, why with the woo-woo nonsense? It's unnecessary.
Evolves into corruption, tyranny, or being too restrictive. The advantage of this system is the ability to operate on scale. If the people in a group submit themselves to the group identity, it allows greater cooperation among larger groups of people. John Haidt talks about how humans evolved to be individuals sometimes, but we have a switch built into us which allows us to turn into hive creatures like ants or bees. Due to this, there are conditions in which we are willing to sacrifice ourselves as individuals for the group. At these times, the individuals act out things that are in the strategy for the total group. This switch is the authority.
No, we are naturally fucking social group creatures. Naturally. It's what the fuck we are. Just as an in general thing, as our species. Like, our species is just a natural fucking group creature. Right? That's our natural state of being. Is literally being inside of a group. What the fuck are you talking about? You turn it the fuck on it. But listen, it's what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be part of a fucking group. Right? That's why it is that, like, it's why it is, like, you have, like, work culture. It's why it is you have communities. We've always had towns or villages. We always had clans or tribes, right? There's no point where human beings lived, like, completely the fuck on their own. That was never a fucking thing, right? And individuals who did, they're usually, like, people who were outcasts and, like, they just survived. And they weren't really living. They were just surviving. This is why, like, yo, if a baby if you don't touch a baby, it fucking dies, right? Like, if you don't hold it and cuddle it and, you know what I mean, nurture it, it dies. Like, real shit. Not about, like, it not being fed, right? It literally just dies from not fucking having any human contact. Like, we're social fucking creatures naturally. The fuck is he talking about?
Axis. In the emotional system I've developed, this axis corresponds very closely to shame and disgust, with shame being prevalent in Asian and non-Western.
What access, son? Did you point to something? Bro, listen, this dude's like, yo, I have not seen any access come up on a fucking video. Like, again, dog, like, you had to, like, put the thing that you're talking about on the fucking screen.
Western civilizations and discussed with conservative societies. As I said before, this also fits with John Haidt's measurement, where this axis pulls from authority, loyalty, and purity. Effectively, this system exists to maintain standards for group behavior. People often like authority since they feel insecure in themselves as individuals, and most of the population actually craves authority. Also, the average person isn't that smart or driven, so they actually do better by following the hive mind. This is not politically correct to say, but this is even more true for women. In Eric Hoffer's great book on totalitarianism, he calls it a freedom from freedom. The massive social changes implicit to the Industrial Revolution caused mass social chaos, which then resulted in people craving authority, thus resulting in monsters like Hitler, Stalin, or Mao. You can pretty closely correlate how closely people follow this axis based off how militarily threatened that area is. I've talked before about how you can correlate authoritarianism based off the borders of the former Mongol Empire. This is since these were societies that were in proximity to the nomadic tribes who were the most deadly military opponents of the pre-modern world. Just the Mongols killed nearly 100 million people during the Middle Ages when the total world's population was 500 million. Thus, societies evolved to...
That's weird. Spain was fucking fascist up until, like, the 1980s and shit, but I mean, yeah, like, you know, they're only the furthest away from the fucking Mongol Empire. Shut the fuck up, bro. Like, God, Jesus Christ.
sacrifice the individual in exchange for the group to fight off the bloodthirsty nomad invaders. And if you want to look at Russia, our previous example, Russia became so autocratic partly based off the Mongol system of governance and also to fight off the Mongols. You can even see this on the European continent, which the countries which created democracy or capitalism were islands or coastal societies like Britain, the Netherlands, Athens, or Rome. The countries stuck in the middle of the map like France, Germany, or Russia became absolutist states. Poland-Lithuania is an example of an attempt to create a republic on the North European plain, and it was crushed by the authoritarian Austria, Prussia, and Russia. This is since in high-pressure situations, authoritarianism is the best social structure. This is why the military is based off authoritarian, unquestioning leadership. The same is true for companies. Whenever I run clubs or my own personal business, I realized you have to create clear hierarchical structures since it's the only way to get things done. You see, this is why most societies in history were autocratic monarchies, since by making an unfair system in which you pick the leader automatically, it lessens friction and allows leadership to move as smoothly as possible. That being said, the other side of this duality is that since the authoritarian system creates stability, it's also not creative. This is even more true in the societies like Russia or China, where they don't have that many alternate institutions to the state like a church, capitalism, or warrior nobility. The rapid changes implicit to the Industrial Revolution have made this system less popular vis-a-vis theocracy or freedom. You can see this over Russian history, in which Russia was constantly being outcompeted.
That's fucking weird, man, because, like, you know, the most beautiful art and culture was always created in places that had authoritarian fucking monarchs. Again, like, this, do you check your shit, bro? Do you check your mentality, or do you just go along with, like, what you feel inside of your brain? Like, this is the problem with liberals, like 100%, bro. 1,000,000% the problem with liberals and individualists. And I guess TFM's right. Right, at the end of the day, like, listen, because, you know, I'm an authoritarian type of dude, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm a reactionary type of guy, so, like, I fucking can't stand this mentality as a whole. And I think a lot of the dudes who, like, in our group where we're like, yeah, we like some of what if all this shit, but then, like, on the other side, we're like, God, he's so fucking liberal, he's left, you know what I mean? Like, yo, that's because, like, we're all motherfucking reactionaries.
By countries like Germany or America, whose more fluid social structures allowed them to advance much faster. The authority-based social structure always ends up with Zerg-like military tactics, using hordes of cannon fodder, driven by unquestioning hierarchies. A great example of the implicit flaws built into this system was that in the Soviet Union, they had rules where you had to unquestioningly follow your superior in the military. And so you hear stories about Soviet units being told to walk directly into a river, and they did it, still drowning, because they knew if they didn't follow the orders exactly right, they were dead men anyway, so might as well just go into a river, because there's at least some chance of survival. China is the society which has founded most so off this axis, although it has evolved to have other axes. Peter Turchin has said that China as a nation has stayed unified so much over its long history due to neighboring the Mongol nomads, who were a great enough threat to create a reason for the Chinese to keep working together. If you look at China, as Francis Fukuyama likes to say, it's a strong state with a weak culture. Over Chinese history,
Yo, China's borders contract and expand repeatedly throughout history. Like, it's like fucking something like 400 fucking times, some crazy shit, right? Because, like, the islands on the southeast part, or the cities on the southeast part of the country where it's like lots of population, don't have the ability to be connected to the rest of them. They're surrounded by jungles and mountains, right? And that big ass plain in the top fucking, you know, the mid northern western part of the country, right? It's part of it's a desert, the other part is, you know, I mean, like, land that's really hard to grow wheat in, right? And then, you know, like, it's just no, all right? China is no. It's like Russia, all right? Like, Russia has remained Russia because it's so fucking big and vast. And the reason why it's authoritarian is because, like, its geography is fucking trash, right? I'm sure some of it has to do with, like, the Mongols and the Huns and all that type of shit or whatever it is, but, like, let's be honest here, all right? Their geography is complete and utter garbage. So in order to be successful, they had to be authoritarian. Right? They had to make sure motherfuckers continued to work together. And all rice cultures are literally heavily socialist because rice. That's why. Right? It has absolutely nothing to do with any of the fucking things that you're talking about right now. I don't know why it is that like you say these words out of your mouth and you don't check anything.
Most of the great fortunes were created by passing a test, which then allowed you to enter the government bureaucracy and then milking that power position for your fortunes. China never evolved a strong church that could push back against the government. The government strangled China's development, whether through preventing the Chinese from fully using the technologies they discovered, like gunpowder, the compass, the printing press, or the steam engine.
Now, everybody but the fucking British controlled the fucking merchants, all right? Because merchants destroy families, cultures, and societies. Everybody knows this is what they fucking do. And I like, again, they're like, this is where the technology comes from, is the merchant standing here using it to create capital to make themselves wealthy, right? Which ends up being a risk for like everybody, whether it's the kings, whether it's the priests, whether it's the people. And you see where we are right now. You notice what happened in World War I and II. Like, this is what happens when you just let technology just run amok, right? It ends up like destroying everybody's fucking lives. This is just how shit operates.
This is a very common theme historically, in that capitalism is very rare, given the incentive for governments is to exploit their own populations. Oftentimes with the government working with the mob. The book Why Nations Fail covers this very well.
The government worked with the mob, and because the mob was the community. It didn't work with the mob was the community. So like, it was just an Italian fucking community. You've seen it as being outside of yourself because like it was Italians and it wasn't white people, like, you know, as you see them, you know what I mean, in your brain. The mob was nothing more than like a community organization in reality, right? You know, it was branches of like a fucking community organization. It was a secondary nation inside of a nation, right? Or inside of a fucking state. That's where we are right now. This is the problem. Like they work with the mob because like, you know, that's who the community, that's who fucking was in charge of the community. So that's who the fuck they work with. It's no different than saying like, hey, you know, whatever township you're in, we're going to like work with the fucking mayor and the cops there, right? Because that's how the hell shit operates, because that's who's running that fucking community. No different. Just keep going, bro. Bullshit.
Which Rome, China, Islam, India, or the European Union had elites which purposely degrew their societies, pushing them into poverty through regulation. China was on the verge of industrial revolution during the Sung dynasty 1,000 years ago, but the bureaucracy regulated the factories out of effectiveness. The bureaucracy strangled the military's development so that China kept on being conquered by nomads who they outnumbered 100 to 1. China's ships sailed as far as Kenya, and possibly America, yet the bureaucracy had no need for a colonial empire. In each case, the haves were scared of anything new since they were already on top. Watch my video on Chinese civilization if you want to know more. Part 2, Freedom. It's the year 1000 AD in Iceland. Iceland is a society without a government. It was established by Vikings fleeing the unification of Norway into a single monarchy. The political structure of Iceland was that everyone met up once a year in the Valley of Thingvellir. They would vote directly on various issues. Iceland didn't have a political leader, government, or bureaucracy. When someone broke the law, the electorate would declare them an outlaw and would say their neighbors could kill them and take their property without repercussions. Another very similar society was Ireland at the same time. Ireland was a society filled with various clans and tribal groups. There's a saying in Irish that every man is king of his own land. Ireland never had a centralized government, and any political growth was immediately torn down by intractable tribal warfare. That being said, the Irish were the freest people in Europe. With both of these systems, the benefits and negatives are pretty obvious. The Irish and Icelanders both had the reputation for being insane warriors.
They lived on land that was complete and utter garbage. That's just the reality of it, all right? The Irish and the Icelanders lived on land that was trash, all right? You know, even today, Ireland is fucking hot garbage. Like, it's really hard to grow anything to fuck there. That's why they grew potatoes the moment they got potatoes, right? Because wheat doesn't grow well there, right? And it was a really easy, like, potatoes are like gardening for dummies, right? Anybody can grow fucking potatoes. That's why they're growing. That's why they grew potatoes, right? Iceland, same type of thing. Like, literally, like, yo, if you want to live in Iceland, good fucking luck, buddy. And the reason why they went to Iceland is literally to get away from the goddamn shit. To get away from fucking the people who were trying to convert them over to Christianity. right? It was the last outpost of like the fucking pagans. Like, bro, like, listen again. Why are you saying these words out of your mouth, right? So, like, again, Iceland didn't want to have, or Iceland. How do I put this? They didn't have a unified. Well, they did have like a basic unified government. That's why, like, you could elect somebody and fucking tell, hey, you're an outlaw. You know what I mean? Like, that is literally a fucking government. But again, you know, you have to have the freedom to be able to operate when shit's that fucking difficult. As opposed to like Russia, where, like, you know, Russia, you know, like the eastern part of Russia that's on the northern European plain had the ability to be able to conduct itself in a way that it could stand here and grow like some basic ass shit. You know what I mean? The rest of Russia, again, was ice. Fucking Siberia. It's terrible. It's a horrible place to live. Just, you know what I mean? Like, come on, dog. You know what I mean? Like, yo, it's geography bases all this shit. Two ways to go. Either extreme freedom or extreme motherfucking, like, authoritarianism. It's one of the fucking two.
The English colonized America with Jamestown. A lot of the guys who did so were veterans of the conquest of Ireland, and they would write, the natives are hard to fight, but at least they're not the Irish. The English tried to have Irish indentured servants or use them as slaves in the colonization of the New World. They stopped trying since the Irish had a nasty habit of slitting their masters' throats in their sleep.
Or it could be the fact that, like, you know, they died of, like, you know, all the tropical diseases, you know what I mean, from down south. Like, that's literally, like, why it is that they stopped having Irish slaves, because they fucking died quickly, right? And you can only get, like, 5 years work out of them at the very fucking most. Because, like, putting, you know, I mean, an Irishman who's, like, super pale white into, like, fucking tropical sunlight is not healthy for him. Then, you know, I mean, they also don't have the built up, like, excuse me, the built up, tolerances to, like, things like malaria and yellow fever like the Africans had. And I mean, that's literally why it is that, you know, you don't have Irish fucking slaves in the New World all like that. I mean, you know, I mean, there's still some pockets of what were known as like the sugar slaves, right, down in Jamaica, right? And there's like white people down there that like somehow survived fucking slavery. But again, you know, I mean, it wasn't just because like they were fucking slitting their master's throats. It's because of the fact that they didn't fucking survive. And black people did, you know, simple. And they also didn't, you know, I mean, use Native Americans because, like, I'll be honest, you know, I mean, the truth was is that, number one, they were too dumb, and number two, they were too proud to be able to be fucking slaves.
Father's side of the family is Irish, and my dad told me dozens of times growing up, it is better to spend a day on your feet than a life on your belly. Honor is the most important thing in life, or we're only barely civilized. The Irish were known for fighting with incredible fanaticism, in which the English literally needed to kill a third of Ireland's population, alongside wiping out its entire ruling class to get the Irish to submit. Then the Irish kept on launching revolts, constructing their entire identity around resisting. When Ireland got independence in order to take back the North, the Irish created the bloodiest and most successful terrorist movement in history. I've read a bunch of Icelandic sagas. Reading them, it's obvious how courageous and tough the Vikings were. There are so many incredibly heroic and Chadly content among the characters. I think we all know, though, that the Vikings raided and invaded so many places, sailing all the way from America to Central Asia. The plots of the sagas are mostly about intractable warfare between clans. With the absence of a centralized government, the way to mediate social issues is that if someone transgressed against you, often even in silly ways like insulting your sister, it then started intractable tribal warfare. Once someone killed your brother, you kill theirs, and then a few years later, half of your clans are dead. A major issue with this system is twofold, in that, as we can see, it doesn't have a way to mediate conflict, and thus there isn't unity. You can see this with both Ireland and Iceland being so torn apart by internal conflicts as to be colonized by external powers, which were England and Denmark respectively. There's a reason the authoritarians win wars. This means that as a society becomes more civilized and urban, the freedom axis gradually gets worn out. That makes sense given this system is the rising or chaotic masculine. Our society has a very incorrect view of freedom in that we see it as egalitarian and peaceful. The reality is that freedom is inherently aristocratic and warlike. If you look at democracies, they only come from warrior peoples, whether the Vikings, English, Romans, Greeks, or Iroquois. The democracy stems from the warband in that someone's place in the warband determines their right to vote, since fundamentally force and power are the same. This is why in medieval parliaments, the nobility, who were the warrior classes, were those who...
If y'all check out my Substack, I write about power, right? And one of the things I write about is I say, hey, listen, all relationships are transactional, right? So like you don't end up having, you know what I mean, like relationships with anybody unless you need to interact with them, right? Or just anything as a whole, right? You know, like you're not going to eat food if you, you know what I mean, don't get substance from it. Right, that's why like none of us, you know what I mean, try to interact as much as we can. We try to not interact with like fucking things like poison ivy because like the relationship is terrible. Right? It's all transactional in the end of the day. Right? So that's what this shit is. Okay? That's what the fuck we're talking about here. It's like literally just all relationships are fucking transactional.
A good vote. All of these societies have a strong sense of honor. In my emotional scheme, this value corresponds very heavily to pride and secondarily guilt. The thing is that when the warband is mobilized, the results are absolutely incredible. This axis in competition is by far the most advanced. The warband provides the structures for why the ancient Greeks, modern Europeans, Romans, Mongols, or so many other nomads were so militarily dominant. This is why so many of the great states in history have been militaristic
Wait. When were the Romans like nomadic? When did that happen, bro? Like somebody need to inform me about this time period because I'm gonna go read about it.
republics, whether Britain, Rome, America, or Athens. This system allows flexibility and naturally pushes manly vigor. Again, the system is very strong, but also degenerates quickly given it's not organized as authority. The thing with this system is that once the warband is mobilized, it can crush all opponents. However, keeping the warriors working together consensually is pretty difficult, and thus it allows a good chance that the system deteriorates over time, and thus the authority-based structure, which is more stable, crushes it. The natural cycle of history is that a martial warrior nation based off a warband forms a society. Then, as it has to organize, it becomes more based around authority. Then a new barbarian people based off another warband conquers the area once the older one grows weaker and degenerate. It's very much like in a nature documentary, you see the baboons on the grassland.
Okay, listen, so I don't really like quoting Voltaire, but he has a good point here. It says history is full of the sound of wooden steps or wooden shoes heading up the steps and, and glass slippers heading down. Right. And the basic premise is as soon as you become comfortable and urbanized and civilized, you know what I mean, you always have to worry about that next up and coming people, right, who are, you know what I mean, like way less civilized than you coming through and, you know what I mean, like basically just ransacking your fucking civilization. Now, this comes from urbanization. This actually doesn't come from, like, you know, just standing here, you know what I mean, like growing a civilization. It comes from urbanization. So as soon as you become urban, you lose all the abilities that you had, you know what I mean, when, like, you were farming and, like, you had a harder life and you knew how to work and, like, you were willing to, like, you know, put the work in to go do shit and you had, like, that discipline and all that type of stuff, right? These are things that, like, you know, we don't really have conversations about because, like, you know, everybody loves this technology and the advancement, and these liberals, you know, thoroughly enjoy, like, the ideas of being able to be philosophers and shit. You know what I mean? That's kind of where things are.
Where the old male grows weak only be taken down by a new younger one coming out of the desert. This system is also so militarily effective that it creates an incentive to use it to predate upon other populations. You naturally see this with the nomads of the Eurasian steppe, killing millions of people and raping and...
All right, listen, there'd be a big difference if, like, you know, this happened repeatedly, right? But, like, the Mongols was like a one-time thing, okay? The Mongols came out of the fucking steppes once, and that was it. After that, the history of Mongolia is them fucking starving to death on a regular basis. I don't know why it is you're bringing them up as, like, you know, just a big thing, you know what I mean? Like, as a thing, like, you had one dude who put together some shit, right? Got some fucking horses and some men together and started ransacking shit and put more men together once he had more money, right? And just ransacked the entire fucking planet. Well, the known planet, most of Asia, you know what I mean, part of, like, Eastern Europe. But that was it, dude. He did that once. And that was the end of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, that didn't happen the fuck again. Right? But this happens every time, like, when you have people who become, like, urbanized and are able to have that happen to them. Right? If motherfucking the Mongols came out of fucking, you know, Mongolia when, like, Persia was, you know what I mean, doing its fucking thing, you know what I mean, like under Darius or something, they would have got fucked up. When the Greeks were on top, or when the Romans were on top, they would have got fucked up. They came in at a time when the Arabs were kind of like falling back into themselves and becoming very decadent, and when Europe was, you know what I mean, like in major disarray. Like, don't stand here and like try to pretend that like all this shit happened, you know what I mean? Just like constantly and repeatedly. That's not a fucking thing, right? But like, I mean, you want like a decent example of this is Iran, right? So the original time when Sumer and Ujik and like the Sumerian people got fucking conquered, it was from the mountain people of Iran, right? These are the original Persians, right? Like these type of things happened when, you know what I mean, like they got really comfortable and they got really weak and they got really effeminate and then like fucking they got fucking ransacked, right? But this happened repeatedly, right? This was not just like a one-time thing. Like, the Mongols was a one-time thing for like fucking 40 years. They killed a lot of fucking people, literally like changed the amount of carbon dioxide in the fucking air in the atmosphere, right? Because of how many fucking people they murdered. But like real shit, this isn't something that, you know, it was like a constant thing that happened with the fucking Mongols. Like, I don't know why the fuck you keep bringing this shit up. Like, it's just like a normal fucking, like, oh man, listen, they did this in fucking, you know, they did this BC, they did this in motherfucking, they did this like 500 BC, and then they did it in like 200 AD, and then they did it in 500 AD. No, they just did it one time in like 800 AD, and that was it. That was the end of it.
Pillaging. This results in situations.
Actually, I think it was like 1200 or something, to be honest with you. Pretty sure it was like 1250. It happened for like fucking 40 years. And then like the Golden Horde settled in, and the Golden Hordes got fucked up. like the descendants ended up, you know what I mean, getting beat the fuck up by the people who came in afterwards. Like, this is just how this works, right? And then like the Turks came in, then the Ottomans came in, and like, listen, come on, dog. You know what I mean?
Where the nomads themselves don't produce much, while they steal from other civilizations. A friend of mine once said the most passive people in the world were the Indians, and the most predatory were the Afghans. He said that this was by design, given India was predated by the Afghans, thus encouraging each kind of behavior through the other.
I want to know, man, how are the Afghans the most predatory people on the planet? The Afghans barely are getting by. They're not fucking predatory, they're hungry. Right? Like, yo, when you're hungry people, you know what I mean? Like, you're living in the fucking mountains in some valley somewhere in the middle of bumfuck Egypt and you have a bad winter, some motherfuckers is gonna leave and come out and find some shit to eat, right? They're not fucking predatory. Like, fuck, again, geography, son, geography.
This system, which internalizes competition, is also capitalism. Western Europe became capitalist while other societies did not, given the merchant classes in Europe started out as pirates. Thus, the centralized government couldn't control them, and they could demand their own privileges due to being so well armed.
No. 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 Like, yo, no, that's not how this works, bro. It's not how to, no. They were traders. They weren't pirates, right? Legitimately, like, yo, capitalism in Europe started in, like, fucking Venice and Florence, right? And, fucking, goddamn, Venice and Florence and Milan, right? And what ended up happening was, like, these people, you know what I mean, like, were benefiting off of, like, the fucking Silk Road trade, right? And in benefiting off the Silk Road trade, they would go and do trade with like the rest of, you know what I mean, like fucking Europe, right? And then the rest of Europe ended up, you know what I mean, like getting cut off from that Silk Road trade because of, you know what I mean, like the Ottomans cutting shit off. And they got tired of things, so they ended up trying to find their own routes. And this is how capitalism fucking started, right? This is, you know what I mean, like literally, like this is how like the first stock company started. Because like a cost of like having a voyage to go out and find things, you know what I mean, and bring them back to like fucking, you know, Britain or France or wherever it was, or Denmark or Sweden, pick a fucking place, I don't care, right? The cost of doing so was like extremely prohibitive. So they stood here and they ended up having a whole bunch of people put money in order to do it. And then basically, you know what I'm saying, whatever the fuck they came back with, you know what I mean? Well, they made the money to put the provisions in and the men in the boat and all that type of stuff. And then whatever the money they came back with, they fucking divvied it up among them fucking people who they paid in, right? So this is the beginning of like stock holdings and shit. This is where capitalism comes from. This has nothing to do with being fucking pirates.
Capitalism is such a successful social system given it allows permanent structured competition, which forces the best player to outcompete the rest. One of the interesting historic threads that no one covers is that the modern startup structure stems from pirate organizations, in which you have a crew, either for the startup or the pirate ship, and they go on a venture together and then they share the spoils. The modern company was originally a pirate and then a trading expedition. A very similar dynamic on the negative side side of this is the Atlantic slave trade. I know this pisses a lot of libertarians off, but the natural logic of the market without other institutions to balance it out is slavery. If you don't have laws against it, landlords will enslave their tenants, and the strong will enslave the weak. The Europeans or Muslims used their superior military ability to turn Africans into a commodity. Europe was able to fully evolve capitalism since it had a church and government to balance out the rapacious young masculine. If you're in a system where the only metric is based off transaction, then it's obvious that you should turn people in.
Wait, what? wait, what? No. Okay. That's literally not why they were. Slavery, all right, is very old. It's probably like one of the oldest things that we have. Prostitution, slavery, innkeeping, pawn people, right? Very old things. Trading, right? And one of the first things that were traded were fucking slaves and beer, right? We had what was known as weapons, right? Gunpowder rifles, right? You know what I mean? Muskets, these type of things, right? I forget what the fuck they called them back in fucking 1500s. But like the reason why the slave trade was able to happen is because we had, I mean, like seafaring ships and like guns. And in having guns, you're able to like, you know, be able to back up anything that you're going to fucking say and do enforcement on like fucking trade deals and things of this nature, right? So like you're going to show up with firearms and whatnot. And then on top of that, being able to trade somebody firearms, you know what I mean? They're able to like go conquer people and then sell them to you. And then you can go and, you know what I mean? Like fucking do plantations and all that type of stuff, right? I don't know why it is that you would say the words that are coming out of your face right now. It's fucking ridiculous.
Into a commodity to trade. If you put this axis in charge of society, you will have the best results, even if it needs to be balanced by the other two axes. This is why the societies built off this are the wealthiest, most technologically advanced, just nicest societies in the world, that being capitalist republics. After that, societies which are socially built off capitalism may be authoritarian, which was Western Europe for most of its history. This is since this structure allows competition and improvement. The reason the West was so successful is that its social structure allowed creativity and self-improvement. If you operate off this structure, a legal code is necessary since you need the law as a way to arbitrate between differing self-interests. Inside the warband, you need a system of rules to arbitrate, while in the authoritarian system, you just submit to your superior's whims. One of the top points Kurt makes is that rule of law is one of the most important variables driving the West's success. You can almost perfectly correlate a society's rule of law with its net worth today. Part 3. Theocracy. The year is 1955, and we're in Maoist China. From the outside, this system may seem like the Tsarist Russia we spoke about before in the video. The government runs literally everything, while there is no private property or interests independent from the state. That being said, you notice something interesting the more you look. In Tsarist Russia, everyone submits to authority itself. In Maoist China, everyone is obsessed with an idea. In China, everyone is pushing towards utopia. When the state tells people to do things, they don't do so because the authority tells them to do so, but supposedly to reach heaven on earth. China at this point was going through the greatest self-inflicted atrocity in history. Over 30 million people died due to a famine called the Great Leap Forward, and 40 million people died in total with Mao's other atrocities. Mao Zedong, the communist dictator of China, had the aim of making China an industrialized modern country within 5 years. This involved forcing the Chinese to make steel. The problem is that what actually resulted was people not farming, thus causing famine. On top of this, China had none of the tools or infrastructure to actually industrialize or even make steel. Thus, they ended up making lots of useless slag iron with no real use for it. A huge driver of the famine was the attempt to use modern socialist agriculture. The problem here is that socialist agriculture was complete pseudoscience and just didn't work. This leads to one of the most toxic elements of this axis, that being the false promise. In this system, you mobilize people with the concept of something better. What we're seeing with Maoist China was an evil religion trying to mobilize people around faith. Unlike other religions, the heaven it offered was of this earth, not of the spiritual. It's interesting and ironic that I call Maoist China a theocracy. The great irony here is that Maoist China was the most militantly significantly anti-religious state in history, in that they persecuted the religious and tore down their temples. That being said, they were also the most theocratic state ever in history as well, in that their whole society, in every aspect of every waking moment of someone's life, was unified and driven around a shared holy project. Maoist China is the society in the whole history of the world which was driven the most by an idea. In Jungian psychology, the feminine is inspirational. Men push themselves hard in order to get laid. In Jungian principles, the feminine is being and masculine is doing. If you want to look at nature, the women of the pack are very important, but they end up mating with whichever group of men takes over. The weight of child rearing pulls women out of the Darwinistic battle for survival, which men take responsibility for. This is even more pronounced for humans of any other species due to us having such long pregnancies, our heads being too large for women's hips for easy, comfortable child's birth, and our incredibly long childhoods. Due to their physical weakness, women wield power through relationships, sex, and verbal ability. Women do a thing called GSR, or gossip.
Now listen, man. I'm over here and I'm like trying to like keep up with like the woo-woo bullshit that he's talking about, right? When it comes to like places like China and Maoist China and shit, right? Like, you know, I'm not gonna stick up for fucking Mao because like just fuck, I'm not. You know what I mean? Because Mao's fucking retarded. But let me say this, right? So if you wanted to stand here and take a people, right, who were completely agriculturalist and turn them into industrialist, there's two ways to do so, right? One is to bring in like other people's like industrialists who know how to build things, you know what I mean, like, you know, steel or whatever the case is. And, you know what I mean, like fucking have them actually own everything like Venezuela did, and then have Venezuela like got fucking raped and collapsed. Same with Saudi Arabia. Right, where Saudi Arabia, you have some very, very rich people, and then everybody else is kind of just fucking impoverished. Or B, you try to do it your fucking self. Right, and if you try to do it yourself and you fucking fail, you know what I mean, then like a lot of people are going to fucking starve to death. Right, a lot of bad things are going to happen, and shit's going to look really terrible. But long term, eventually you're going to figure it the fuck out. And once you figure it the fuck out, guess what? You know what I mean, like now you have some shit, you know what I mean, that you can do, and like, you know, you can start building off of these type of things. And that's what ended up happening long term. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that like it was like the best thing that ever happened. I'm saying that it did happen. And look at China today. And we can say what we want about China being, you know, blase, you know, fucking it's, you know, like fucking it's falling apart and the birth rate's collapsing and all that shit. But again, urbanization, right? Like you pulled everybody off of the fucking farms and put them in the cities, you know what I mean? All the fucking females out of one fucking territory and put them in another, right? You know what I mean? Away from all the men, you know what I mean? Stacked them like 15 to a fucking room and had them working in iPhone factories, putting together y'all's motherfucking iPhones. This is, you know what I mean, what tends to fucking happen in the end of the day. But like, you know, this is what you do. You know, that's the mentality. So, I mean, like, and I'll be honest with you, like all the things that like he's going through, like I can't be the only one who's having a hard time keeping up with this shit. Let me know in the chat if y'all think y'all are having a hard time as well.
Gossiping, shaming, and rallying. This is using relational warfare in order to attain their goals. Women who use these kinds of tactics do better sexually and reproductively than women who don't, and thus they evolved this ability. Women evolved more advanced verbal and empathic abilities than men in order to navigate or manipulate interpersonal relationships better than men. This is since women are physically weaker and don't work in packs like men do, thus they made up for it sexually and socially. Due to this, women's two great strengths became social skills and sexual access. We can see this very clearly today in that if you criticize modern women for anything, the immediate attack on you is to call you an incel, even if that's ridiculously untrue, since the aim is to discredit you through your lack of social status or sex. It's remarkable how common it is today once you know how to look for it and how many different ways it happens, but our society takes these verbal attacks completely seriously. GSR is a form of social piracy and toxic femininity. Toxic femininity.
Yo, man, listen. Hold on. Let me look over here, bro. Can you see that bitch's arm? Why that bitch's armpit look that way, bro? Why her armpit look like a vagina? The fuck is going? She have a vagina in her armpit, bro. Listen, I need to meet this chick because she got a vagina in her armpit, bro. Because, like, listen, I need an extra new hole. You know what I mean? I'll fuck that bitch in the armpit, dog. Like, yo. Bet that shit smell proper.
In general involves crabs in the bucket thinking, envy, social shaming, hysteria, conformity bias, the abdication of responsibility, magical thinking, removal of context, and distortion. It's effectively the manipulation of words to serve a social end. My friend Homath is a great example of this from one of his videos, talking about how a woman can use the threat of ruining someone's reputation to get a promotion at work is the equivalent of a man using physical force to bully someone into a promotion. This system is hardest to explain in our society, since an aspect of GSR is the obfuscation of trying to understand it through social shaming. You can see through freedom or authority, those are concepts we have very easy terms and ideas out in our society, but we don't have a word for GSR or any of this stuff because our society is so enthralled to it that you're not allowed to talk about it. If you were to imagine toxic femininity personified into an ideology.
By the way, what up, Legendary Juice, Sith Matt, and Ballistic Zero? How the fuck y'all doing this morning, man? Listen, I was just, me and TK were talking about making this fucking video, and I was like, yo, listen, I'm gonna make this video today, bro. Like, fuck it, like, let's get it done.
It would push for equality at the expense of merit, use distorted language to push for its aims, would hate greatness, abdicate responsibility to the government. It would be obsessed with care, the avoidance of suffering, and would treat everyone in the population as children, being worried about their safety and regulating them. It would motivate people with the false promise of utopia. This is the ideological equivalent of women leading men on sexually. Doesn't this sound a lot like communism or leftism? Women have historically not really been in danger of dying in war. This is since the conquerors would just marry the women of the defeated tribe. In fact, the women nearly had an incentive to have their side lose a war, since the victor would be stronger and thus have better genetics to pass on and would protect them better. This would in turn establish an incentive structure to create a social system built mostly around emotional stabilization or ego protection. It would not actually be about solving problems, but making the people in the group feel as good as possible. The societies themselves would be dysfunctional, but they would have the most beautiful myths to justify them. We can see this parallel in leftism today, and if you're even more controversially, traditional world religions, where they don't make a barrier between what they want to be true and what the actual reality of the world is. And if you disagree with what are their faith-based arguments for what they want to be, then they'll destroy your reputation. And so it's a worldview based around what feels good, not what the reality is. This is a tough.
See, here's the issue, right? Is that, they don't have like faith-based arguments, right? This is a big thing to understand. What they have is they have managerialism, right? And in managerialism, only like a few people at the top actually understand what the fuck is going on, right? Everybody else at the bottom just gets marching orders, and then they just like spout it because like they're Pavlovian trained, right? And this is kind of like something that a lot of motherfuckers really don't understand, is that most people have these Pavlovian responses put into their brains when they're fucking kids and shit, right? And so, like, when you fucking stand here and you have somebody say some shit to you, right, you have an automatic response that comes up in your brain, right? It's like that fight or flight thing, but like it's the same thing with like your responses. Like when you hear somebody on the internet and they're like insulting females or whatever the case is, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, like, motherfucker, you automatically hear you're an incel, who hurt you, you know what I mean? And like fucking, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you must hate your mom or some shit like that. You must have mommy issues. These are like the three things that motherfucking broads will respond with. And this is, or like what people will respond with. Or like it'll automatically be like, well, dudes do this too. I know everybody's heard that like a bajillion times, right? These are Pavlovian responses. And so, like, when they're standing here saying nonsense, it doesn't make any fucking sense. It isn't the fact that, like, it doesn't make any sense to you or to them. It's the fact that, like, literally, like, they're spouting some shit that they've been Pavlovian trained to say because they're, like, foot soldiers, and you're arguing with an NPC. You should probably stop doing that. Right? I mean, you can use it if you know that you're practicing. You know what I mean? If you're practicing your arguments and you're working out new ideas and new ways to flip some shit around on somebody's head, that's a fucking great way to do things, right? But if you're literally like trying to argue with them to convince them some shit, you probably should stop, because like they're an NPC and they've been Pavlovian trained, and like you're not going to break their Pavlovian training. Let's keep rocking though.
topic which I know will be controversial, but at the same time, I have covered it in a few previous videos. Both the feminine and authority are collectivists, submerging the individual into the group. This makes sense in that almost all societies in history are collectivist, in which people lived in clans with arranged marriages, set religions, social taboos, and traditions. The individual doesn't matter in these societies. Europe is basically the historical exception for being individualist. This being so far, we focused on the negative aspects of the feminine but not the positive, which there are. Without the feminine, the masculine loses purpose. Women balance men out, stabilizing them. Men do their deeds, but then the women are always there, creating the next generation and keeping the society running. As I have said before, the masculine is the doing and the feminine is the being. In some ways, being is more important to happiness in life than doing, since we're always stuck inside ourselves and we're always stuck inside our own minds and bodies. I know loads of successful people, but they're often miserable since they aren't comfortable inside their own skin. The feminine aims at emotional and inner stability. Thus, the feminine in its healthy form tries to increase mindfulness. Mindfulness is the inner calmness in difficult situations. To be mindful of the battle around you but still to keep your cool. All the major world religions and many philosophies like Stoicism are all about mindfulness. They all want you to sync your mind in with God so you can feel inner peace. By surrendering to the state of being, you can feel inner calm at all times. The degree to which a society builds itself around emotional stabilization determines how feminine it is. In a theocracy, the society is run by appealing to the emotional demands of the people in the society at the expense of dealing with the outside world. Examples of this over history besides communism are the Catholic Church, Islam, the theocracies of Mesopotamia.
Yo, ESP, I'll be real with you, man. Listen, so like I went and I picked up my kids and we went to the pool this weekend and shit, you know what I mean? And like my daughter, who supposedly has had like, you know, like fucking the cold for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks or some shit, like she was still sick. And I'll be honest with you, like I feel like ass right now. It's only been happening like the past like 20 minutes. It's probably because like, you know, I'm fucking sitting here watching the shit and I'm allergic to bullshit. But like, you know, this is kind of, you know what I mean? Like, yo, that's, man, you know, you never know, dog. You never know. Some motherfuckers, like, yo, summer colds fucking suck, bro. You should probably feel bad for motherfuckers who have summer colds, just in general. Whether it's COVID or whatever it is, yo, you should feel bad. Motherfuckers like, bro, listen, you got a summer cold? That fucking sucks, dog. Like, I feel for you. Nothing worse than being sick in the summertime. It's like 100 degrees outside. You got a fever? Ugh, miserable. Miserable, dog.
Or India. In each case, the elites are those who train the populace on how to be the best. Religion is about improving your conduct as an individual, and people's moral value is hopefully assessed by their internal character. I am personally more in favor of this system than Kurt is. One of the largest differences we have between us is that I am more pro-religion than Kurt is. I say this since people need this psychological stabilization to not go crazy. Removing it results in, ironically, our society, in which we're committing suicide as a civilization while we have the worst mental health in history, which I have said will ultimately kill our society unless it's stopped. I think you really need to establish a duality. You need to have this feminine side in a society no matter which other masculine side it's balanced with. This is why every major society in history is religious, and for most societies, religion was the most important thing in someone's life. The question is whether or not the religion is healthy. The relationship between men and women.
Again, I get back to like, bro, listen, this is about culture, right? At the end of the day, like that's the whole point of like the authoritarian shit, right? Again, this is supposed to be about the political trichotomy. Hang on, bro. Let me grab a motherfucking joint. Bitch in here. Hold this here. All right, listen. So like, you know, like this is what this fucking shit's supposed to be about, okay? Right? Like this is what, like, you notice that like this has not been on the fucking screen in, I don't know, like 40 fucking minutes, right? Probably 30, 35 minutes. We haven't seen this on the screen, right? Where like, you know, what you should be doing if you're having this conversation is having this on the fucking screen to explain what you're talking about. You know what I mean? To go like, oh, here's where this is. Here's where this is. Here's where this is. Let's talk. And like, you know, what you should have done is like, oh, look, you know, fucking look, and we're going to talk about the absolutists. Oh, look, we're going to talk about the communism. Oh, we're going to talk about the individualism. Let's talk about the middle ground. Let's talk about the fucking side ground. Let's talk about like the corners and shit, right? You know, and so like when you do this shit, right? You know what I mean? Like, so when you have these conversations, you're supposed to have like this shit up on the fucking screen, right? So like, I'm not 100% with him, like where he's at right now with any of this shit. But like the absolutist part of this, right, is the part where like, you're having a conversation about like defending your, fucking, um, like defending your culture, defending your people, and like maintaining all these type of things, right? Because you need to be able to maintain all this type of shit. Like you can't have a religion without a culture. Like that's fucking impossible, right? If you don't have a culture, you don't have a fucking religion, because there's nothing for that religion to hold together. Because it's a religion it's a fucking glue, right? So like, I just like fucking this whole communism thing. Communism like legitimately comes out of like, like the whole idea of like, your family structure and Christianity and everybody being equal and whatnot, right? You know what I mean? Like that's literally where all that shit comes from, right? And then you have like the individualism, which is fucking retarded, as a whole, right? But like the individualism, is like, you standing here being about you, this fucking hedonism, right? And like, we're not having these conversations just as an in general thing. Like let's keep going. This dude doesn't know how to make a video.
In a society determines how that culture deals with chaos. The great Asian civilizations of India, China, or Islam fossilized once they repressed women too much starting around 1000 AD. Our current society, which has no rules for the feminine, is spiraling into madness now. Europe was able to establish a very successful and adventurous society through giving women the highest amount of social authority of any major civilization, which forced men to have to do more to impress them. At the same time, men were able to hold women accountable socially. A great irony is that the societies which pull from this axis the most are the most misogynistic. The Middle East is a civilization founded off theocracy, in that in modern Islam, the legal code, government, philosophy, and clan structure are all founded off religion. This isn't true for the Middle East going back to the ancient Babylonians, Jews, or Egyptians. India is similar, also being a society run by the priests. Ironically, these societies both gave women basically no rights. It reminds me of the old joke that goes, women understand other women, and women hate each other. The feminine can be positive, as I keep saying, and is something I think young men today often forget, so I want to keep reminding you folks of it. An example of this is organized religions, which use social shaming, aesthetic, and the promise of something better to guide people towards pro-social and positive ways of life. Religions train people from birth to be humble, kind, grateful, wise, courageous, among other things. Christianity used the feminine skills for good by telling people to love each other. The feminine is based off love in that women evolved to love their children. Thus, Christianity was able to get around the negatives in female behavior by tapping into something that they evolved to do anyway, or being more pro-social for everyone around them. Christianity also has the best protections against GSR and envy. I think this is part of the reason why Christian societies are those which treated women the best, since it effectively tamed the worst aspects of female nature. The communist pro-social axis evolved for the family, and thus it results in generally trying to
just simp, man. This dude's just a fucking simp, right? In the end of the day, this guy's a fucking simp. He just simps it the fuck out, just all day long, every day, 24 hours a day. He's a fucking simp, right? Because like I'm sitting here in my brain, I'm like, man, listen, there's a lot of other fucking places that treated women pretty fucking well, right? And even in like places like fucking Asia, like you can stand here and try to pretend that like females were, not treated well, but like the truth is fucking women had like way more abilities. Like if you read some of like the old letters from people who went to like Japan and Asia and shit, for the first time, they stood here and talked about how like the women were able to like just go fuck whoever they wanted, and like fucking they were nowhere near as chaste as they were in, or chaste and fuck as they were in Europe. Like these, like it's ridiculous. And even in Europe, like women weren't allowed to like learn how to read or fucking have property or any of these type of things, right? And they weren't made into be priests. That's why like Catholic Church stopped women from being priests, because like you don't want to put women in charge of like your fucking religion, because you end up with Protestantism, which is where you are today. That'll explain why it is that none of you motherfuckers go to fucking church and shit. And why? Because none of us like fucking having to hear like about how we should all bitch up and act like fucking cowards all the time. Nobody wants that shit. Like, so let's keep this 100% honest here, right? This is nonsense and garbage and bullshit, bro. But like, we're gonna finish this shit up real quick.
reach an extension of a brotherhood of family across an entire nation or an entire world. The problem is that the harmony inside a family can't scale across a group that large. This means that when this system tries to apply itself on a large scale, or more so than it just evolved for on the family basis, the results are terrible. This is why theocracies often fail, while also theocrats are normally pretty delusional. The aim for this axis is what's good, not what's true. They often aim for what they want to be true, not what is.
Iranian GDP growth 2005. I mean, like, listen, the country that's been like probably the most heavily sanctioned by America, like before Russia invaded their fucking Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, like, I fucking can't, bro. Like, I fucking can't.
A very important detail here is that we view the economics of family as unimportant because in the West, families largely aren't that important. But keep in mind, almost all humans in history lived in clans, where you live and work with people who are your relatives. Your parents arrange your marriage, you work at your cousin's store, and all of your life is your family. So for most people in most of history, the most important economics were the economics of family. Of all these axes, this is the one which is most broken today. We are seeing a pandemic of toxic femininity. The West is committing civilizational suicide due to its own guilt, thus killing itself for emotional stability. Due to the Industrial Revolution removing men's advantage with physical labor, this axis is at the strongest point ever in history, as opposed to the other two. This is why the government today is all about creating policies that look good on paper, assuaging people's guilt, whether or not they're actually useful or effective. Our populations have terribly poor mental health. We need to fix this axis now if we want our society to survive. Unless we can't parcel through this system and take responsibility for our own mindfulness, we're doomed.
All right, fellas. That was fucking interesting. But like, yeah, listen, I think TFM did much better in like fucking, 7 minutes than this guy did in 42. So like, it is what it is. So I'm gonna tell you what, man, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Tom Pease of Pnoid News. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out my fucking Substack, bro. Like, real shit. Link is in the description.